Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Breaking Changes podcast. I'm your host and chief evangelist for Postman, Ken Lane. With Breaking Changes, we explore topics from the world of APIs, but we look at things through the lens of business and engineering leadership. Joining me today, we have Ryan Kirk, lead cloud architect and team manager at Formula One. I was super impressed at how Formula One is taking full advantage of being cloud native to stand up and tear down what they need to support each race around the world, and all along the way, increasing their team's velocity. I always start really simple with the basics. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Ryan Kirk. I'm the lead cloud architect and team manager at Formula One. So kind of my bag, I guess, is kind of anything to do with cloud. I sort of do kind of technical strategy as well as implementation as well. And so kind of the cloud function very much lives in kind of my court, and the DevOps function as well, which is a recent kind of it's kind of more of a recent thing, but yeah, so anything DevOps as well. So that's, it's been a great sort of combination of teams, I guess, within the business.
Yeah, I would say you said two phrases that send me signals that you're a little further along in what we would consider your API journey, because embracing the cloud and a DevOps kind of culture are two important signals that we look for when it comes to understanding where our customers are. But tell me, like, what's with the cloud transformation, and is it recent? Is it new? Have you been on this journey for a while? What's it look like?
So we're kind of a bit late to the party in terms of kind of cloud adoption goes, and we adopted the cloud, specifically AWS, 5 years ago when we partnered up with them, and up until then, we had dabbled kind of in cloud tech, but we were very much an on-prem solution, and it really kind of accelerated our cloud adoption, kind of having that partnership, and it was like opening a tool chest of all these kind of magical toys that we had never sort of seen or played with. So it was quite good fun, especially in sort of the beginning. So sort of kind of prior to that, we had an on-prem solution, and it's sort of an incredibly bespoke solution, but it worked for us. We're a traveling circus, I guess, in that kind of aspect. We had a huge data center that would travel kind of to every single event. So you kind of picture your kind of corporate data center in a way that would have, off the top of my head, probably between 30 and 40 racks of kit. And we would, up and lift that. We'd go to the circuit and have all the engineers go sort of the week before the event. And there was kind of a really fine-tuned kind of routine, I suppose in a way, that everyone kind of knew what they were doing, even from the kind of the smallest of processes. So we could get this kind of behemoth rigged up and ready and tested within a matter of 48 hours. And we would have the race, and it would all come back down again, get put back on a plane, and off it went. And that's how it ran for a good part of 15 years. So that's it was one of those, if it isn't broken, don't touch it type things. And then once we signed with AWS, it kind of opened our eyes in terms of kind of what we could do with the cloud, from kind of a corporate aspect as well as a race aspect as well, and really kind of use what the cloud is great for, and that's having sort of event-driven architectures and the infrastructure that you wouldn't necessarily or typically have access to in kind of a standard kind of data center. And then once that snowball was rolling, it just kind of picked up momentum, and more and more sort of ideas got thrown into the mix, and here we are sort of 5 years later.
Wow. Yeah, it's an important journey, and it's one I see a lot of enterprises on right now. And so I'm guessing with this journey, you touched on a little bit, newfound powers, requires newfound skills and people to kind of start paying attention and managing this at an operational level. So the DevOps culture kind of comes in. Can you tell me a little bit about like what that looks like at Formula One?
Yeah, sure thing. So I mean that was the the hurdle was kind of the cloud adoption in a way, in the sense of getting over that kind of idea of you can't go and switch it off. You can't go and reboot it physically. It's all you don't see it. It's magic. It happens way in the distance. So that was kind of one thing. And then the second thing was this the idea of DevOps. And we kind of dabbled in what I suppose what you could kind of class as DevOps in a way, kind of automation within kind of task schedulers and that sort of stuff. So the idea wasn't completely foreign to us. However, the whole what kind of 99% of people like you and me would consider DevOps now was an alien idea, and it was something that took us a little while to kind of bring it into the culture. Sort of you can sort of say to sort of developers, you can deploy, and it it just takes care of it. It will move, and it's kind of, well, how does it move? How does that process work? If we just put it in a single location, how does that work? How does the change approval process work? How does this work? And there were loads of questions, but they were all good questions, because it helped the educational part of it kind of helped the selling point in a way, but it helped the adoption, because it was like, look at this. This is we can fully automate this, and we can like auto recover this, and it, yeah, again, it was another snowball that kind of just picked up momentum, and now we run especially sort of cloud. Every single one of our systems is fully kind of automated deployments through change control. We have we're very heavily involved in DevSecOps in the past kind of 18 months. So all that automatic kind of security remediation and reporting has saved us bucket loads of time. Even from kind of rotating API keys. It's something that takes 10 seconds if you've got one key to rotate. If you've got, say, hundreds, and you do it every single 3 months, and bringing DevOps into that process, saving that kind of operational overhead you can't really put a price on it. So we've kind of got fingers in all kinds of pies in DevOps, within sort of DevSecOps. We've got GitOps. We've got kind of traditional CI/CD processes. Standard kind of automation in that sense.
Yeah, I would say everything ops seems to be a common theme for this show across. I mean, we're data ops, ML ops, model ops, all the full spectrum we're seeing too. And so you're preaching everything that your team needs, as far as automation and flexibility and agility. How did you explain this to leadership? What sort of convincing did leadership need to understand the benefit of all of this?
So for DevOps, it was kind of a build it and they will come type thing. We kind of developed these kind of proof of concepts in the background. It was just let's see if we can automate this, and it was more of a show and tell rather than this is kind of what we want to do. It was, this is what we've been doing. Come and have a look, and we would sort of showcase some of our solutions, and that kind of just ended up selling itself in that way. It was it was, well, and the fact it kind of, especially from sort of senior leadership and management, it was very much, okay, well, these deployments are going into production. What change control processes do you have? And yeah, okay, it's fine. Once it hits this point, we get an email, and then it gets approved, and blah, blah, blah. So once that part was out the way, it really did kind of sell itself. It didn't take very much convincing, and the proof was in the pudding. I mean, in the sense that it was, the ticket numbers for sort of manual kind of deployments and the requirement for manual deployments severely decreased, and the results kind of just shone through of the benefit that it has to a business.
Yeah, it's I would say what I'm seeing across a lot of different organizations is is they incrementally just start living in this new kind of cloud native, elastic way, find these superpowers, demonstrate what's happening. But it's not like overnight everything's fixed, and you still have to deal with legacy partners. You still have to deal with a lot of things that are happening. But this agile or more elastic core of cloud native is really beneficial to helping evolve all the conversations with leadership, conversations with partners, all of that. Are you seeing benefits outside of your core team and leadership from this approach?
Yes, so we've sort of had quite a big focus on repetitive tasks for people like our development teams. So an example of this would be so at the end of each race, so on a Sunday night the race happens, we would we back everything up, which is fairly kind of expected, and our sort of data teams and our development teams they want access to this data as quick as they can, and especially sort of all the databases and that contain the newest kind of car data, lap data, timing data, telemetry, all that sort of stuff, because they want to be able to test with it. So kind of typical in the kind of old kind of pre-DevOps worlds, that would be a traditional kind of a ticket into IT. The engineer would kind of take that back up and restore it into the development environment. But it's a process that takes a little while. So through kind of DevOps, we've managed to build a self-service type environment that allows developers and people to once that backup's there, they can log in, hit go, and it will just go and deploy into that environment without kind of a need of someone in IT. So that's just kind of one of the things. So that self-service, it benefits kind of both departments, in the sense that like the devs, they're unblocked. They can run with whatever they want to do within reason, of course, and the IT guys then don't get these tickets kind of building up and and being poked and prodded to do them for the next day. So it's a bit of a mutualistic relationship in that sense. But again, that kind of core kind of DevOps is the real sort of not so secret sauce that provides that.
So how do you make this? You mentioned how you're, I would say, enabling developers. There's a certain part of this that's there's amount of governance. You're putting in guardrails for developers to kind of exist. It's a very common approach with the clouds, but you're giving developers, and you mentioned self-service. Self-service is a really important theme that we're seeing. So how do you make this visible to developers so they know what's possible, what's out there? Is it documentation? Is it observability? What do you do to help them see this very abstract landscape that exists?
So we kind of sit with them. So we work very closely with them anyway, and we will kind of they will come to us with their sort of bugbears, and sort of say is there a way that we can do this, for example, and we chat it out. How would you want it to work? Where would you want it to go? And we kind of just sort of take those requirements in and kind of facilitate that. We might sort of say, well, here we go, that we've kind of taken your requirements, and this is what the output is, and this is it, and see what they think. And that's kind of it. So it's quite sort of, it's an informal sort of a chit chat on kind of how, and but I mean good sort of stimulating conversation comes out of it. I mean, it can be anything from that sort of database restoration. It can be creating repositories that are consistent. It can be there's a sort of a variety of stuff.
Yeah, so it's a very, very white glove kind of feedback loop with them. I'm guessing this is perpetual. This isn't like a one-time sit down and then we're done, over. It's in an ongoing way.
It's ongoing. We catch up with teams across the business almost kind of weekly, just for we either kind of sit back and chew the fat and just have a chat, or we talk, right, okay, this is we're having a bit of a problem with this. Can you guys do anything? Is there anything you guys do can make this kind of quicker, easier, less reliance on you guys? And and sort of it comes out in that format.
Nice. I like it. I think we rely on a lot of automation where it makes sense. Sometimes I feel like as enterprises, we go a little too far with automation where we need probably just
Yeah.
some humans in there figuring this out and actually understanding how it works. So I think that really reflects that. And I think the other area I'm seeing it critical being human alignment is not every developer on the ground understands all of what's needed from the 100 or 500,000 foot view when it comes to security, when it
Yeah.
comes to regulation. And a lot of those things need to be kind of packaged up and provided to them. It's back to those guardrails or that enablement. So what's the regulatory landscape? I mean, you guys are a circus or a carnival moving around. I'm guessing you roll through different jurisdictions. You got things you got to think about when it comes to data storage and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is it. And our information security team is kind of another team that we work, incredibly closely with, because it's, as we all know, it's kind of easier to implement something going in than try and reverse engineer it when the newspaper gets rolled up and you get bonked on the head with it because you haven't met a certain compliance requirement. So I like to sort of think we're quite well versed in those kind of security requirements, and especially sort of the cloud is one thing. It's kind of those kind of standards. We run against AWS's security framework and CIS benchmarks and all that sort of kind of that sort of stuff. We build a lot of automation around that, so that then kind of takes care of it for us. So that if any kind of future things come up, it just will just go and remediate that rather than finding out that the production system's got something that we wouldn't necessarily want. Back at sort of our kind of our traveling circus, it's that was a tricky one because it was it works kind of don't touch it type thing, and it's a hard thing to kind of put security guardrails around something that's kind of so bespoke and kind of so delicate in that sense. Not delicate from a resiliency perspective, but I mean we only have one of these, so this was a data center there was one of that would go to every single event, and without it there was no race. So but yeah, they go those InfoSec guys, they run a tight ship and they do very well to kind of keep it all kind of under control, because as you can imagine, we deal with hundreds of different kind of consumers, and that might be video consumers, data consumers, broadcast services. It's not just kind of what we see on the screen. It's there's a load kind of that happens in the background, global customers and that sort of thing. So yeah, they do a good job to kind of keep that locked down without affecting that operation.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the cloud's giving you a lot of more agility and flexibility, but also control and with those guardrails, I'm guessing there's governance in place to keep people from making changes right before a race or pushing something bad right on a Friday night right before a race or something like that.
Yeah, we have a really interesting change freeze, and it's quite famous. Sort of when we sort of tried to explain it to to certain kind of parties, it's quite tricky because we have, so the race obviously happens on a Sunday. Now on Thursday we have a closed kind of full system test. So there's the FIA will drive a car around a track for an hour, and it's filmed like an F1 session. It's treated as an F1. What we class, so when we're live on air on TV, we call it a session. So if I refer to it as a session, that's kind of what I mean. So we're as like a, we are live on air. We are all systems go. Everything is in live production. So we treat this as kind of an F1 session, as it were, and everyone sits in place and as if there was F1 cars going on the track. Now, as soon as that starts, that marks the official change freeze of anything kind of technical that can affect the broadcast. There's a little bit of sway, sort of our network teams and those kind of more critical infrastructures, they're real sort of low level infrastructure. Their change freeze is the day before, because you don't really want to be putting in stuff like router changes before a change freeze. So they kind of step back and do it. in case there's any issues, they have time. So that marks the change freeze. Now, nothing can change from then until the end of the race. However, there are always issues. So these things happen. We do have to do emergency changes. Everything is logged meticulously, logged and discussed, and also kind of, what's the plan? Is it going to happen again? Like you can sort of, you found something that's not gone right. How are you going to fix it? How are you going to kind of stop this from happening again? And then once the race is over, the change freeze lifts, and it's funny because when we have, we might have maintenance being done, and it can be on any part, not sort of internal maintenance, but maintenance might be connectivity providers, it might be bits in AWS, it might be kind of here, there, and everywhere. And from their perspective, they'll kind of go, right, we'll do it on Saturday at 1 a.m. or Sunday at 1 a.m. because that's out of hours. Customers are Monday to Friday. It's not quite like with us. If, say, for example, we are racing in Japan, Sunday morning at 2 a.m., we might be in the middle of qualifying or, we could be live on air. So, and you kind of try and explain this. And it's like, I know you're kind of doing maintenance. It's out of hours, but it's not out of hours for us. So we bring them on board with our change freeze quite often, especially if they're partners of ours, and sort of bring them into as part of the overall change freeze within F1 itself, because we always do all of our kind of race systems. We do all our maintenance and patching on a Monday and Tuesday. Those are our kind of downtimes because no matter where you are, it won't affect the race. So it's interesting kind of navigating. It took a while to adjust. It's kind of navigate those kind of obscure times.
Yeah, it's much more just regions. I hear a lot about regions, and the cloud helps there. But and being global, we all talk about we're global businesses and we're all kind of tech companies these days. But that's an interesting mix across the board of time, scheduling, and critical nature. Because retail stores will have high sales during certain hours of the day, different, but yours is much more rolling and kind of different and unexpected. I'm guessing. So does the cloud and DevOps and APIs, is this kind of state of being you feel like is making this all doable for y'all as a team and making it so you can deal with any challenge comes your way?
Yeah, it does, and using kind of kind of best practice, infrastructure as code, using stuff like GitOps, we know that we can recover elsewhere with quite a small kind of recovery time objective. It's we've got it all defined. It would just be a case of, instead of pointing it to A, we just point it to B if there's an issue in A, and and give us a little bit, and it will all come up, and services resume. So it's really kind of how, and we test these, and and we do kind of that war game style testing quite regularly, and and it's one, it kind of how it feels. It's a confidence thing, because you've shown that if it all goes wrong this side, you can do it on the other side, and and that's great. And also, if you start having issues, stuff like underlying infrastructure and stuff, you have that automation that can pick up those things almost kind of as they happen, rather than oh yeah, this happened and it's happened 5 minutes ago or a minute ago. It can almost kind of pick it up, and it will do what it needs to do, kind of almost in the background. So by the time we get an alert, a chain of stuff has happened that we should already be in a better place by the time we've logged in. So yeah, through automation and DevOps, it's really, it fills you with confidence more than anything.
Yeah, having a handle over your topology like that, you mentioned infrastructure as code. I just don't remember 20 years ago being able to have this level of control or the granularity of control over how things work. And then to ever be able to go, I mean, I could roll back a database, but I couldn't roll back my whole infrastructure to the last known state or set it up anew. It's a really new kind of state, a reality that we live in that seems almost like we're living in the future, right?
Yeah, it really is, and it's kind of, and again, kind of coming to that management aspect when you kind of describe, oh, we're doing infrastructure as code, and kind of see a bit of a blank look. It's like, they can kind of piece together what it is, but they don't know how the benefits of it. And you kind of say, well, this entire multi-tier system that runs this service that's important. So yeah, we can just within a couple of commands, and it will just spin up over there, and it will just work. And it's bizarre in that, like you said, it's kind of that kind of futuristic way of working that 10, 20 years ago you kind of wouldn't have thought that you would be looking at maybe sort of 60 lines of code, and you can move an entire system in the background. So it's again, can't really put a price on that in a way.
Yeah, and I try to, I've heard quite a few signals from you that y'all are further along in your journey than some of the other enterprises I talk to in healthcare, finance. And you mentioned, like, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. I mean, there's attitudes like that in finance that are like, go 40, 50 years back, and so they've got a lot of technical debt to deal with. But just the way that you've talked about the benefits of DevOps, the benefits of cloud elasticity, the benefits of being able to move and have control of your topology, shows that you guys have kind of gotten over the hump with it. I mean, there's always challenges that we have to face, always fires, issues, but it shows you just have a lot more control over the landscape than I think some of the conversations I've had. What interests you in all this? I mean, personally, what's the thing that excites you about coming to work each day in this landscape? Because that's the other aspect of this I see, is people seem to be happier in these states. So what keeps you excited?
I think it's I'd probably say at the rate that it changes, it's kind of almost a kind of a full state to have something perfect. And that's quite sort of nice in a way, because there's a million and one ways to do things, and there's always ways you can improve what you've got. You might have something that's very, very good, very resilient. There'll always be something that you can kind of change, and especially with these cloud providers, they roll out, they work so hard in the background, rolling out new features, new services, new architectures and stuff, that where it's so dynamic, you kind of never sit stagnant. And that's what I really enjoy that about it, because it's something that a system that we put in a year ago, and we might look at it and go, all right, let's just strip it out, change the technology, try and innovate further. Let's focus on bringing the efficiencies in, we can bring the cost down, we can bring the resilience up. And it's kind of that kind of dynamic side of things, I think, that kind of excites me, is that no day's the same. And and sort of my team and I, the stuff that comes through the front door on kind of requests and bits and pieces, we obviously will deal with, and the race side of it we will deal with. But kind of on that, outside of those two, we just kind of work what we want to work on. So if we decide, let's do a little POC on this, and just kind of sit there and work on it, and it just makes it fun. If you're a tech head, then it's good fun just having a good old tinker around, pretty much, and seeing what you can do with the tool set that you have.
And so one thing I notice when I have all these conversations with different enterprises in different industries is people can't see the benefits of being in an environment where there's not always a fire or something crazy, or all this legacy infrastructure operating that you have no idea how it works. Is you're given more breathing room, you're given more space to do these kind of prototypes and innovation, because you're not always chasing the latest, you're not jumping on the fire truck chasing the latest fire. And so, but what you just described, like I guess in these other more chaotic environments where things have grown up wildly or organically, people want things to be done. They're like, well, just tell me when we're done with Kubernetes. Like, tell me when we're done with API first. Like, they view things as a checkbox. Like, and what you described would scare the hell out of them, like perpetual change. I mean, is this? I mean, is this just you and your personality? You like change, or do you think it's just the state of doing business moving forward that all businesses are going to have to deal with change at this pace?
I think it's a bit of both. I do like change. I do, but I also think that it is, as you said, it's in these kind of historic kind of systems and these monolithic kind of legacy systems that is, we'll just leave it alone. Eventually, it's got to change. It has to, and even sort of not kind of monolithic legacy systems. Eventually, they sort of will change. So if you're changing them regularly, then and you're keeping up with various trends, it's not such a big step. It's we might a good example is say you kind of containerize an application. It's okay, you've containerized it and you run it how you want to run it, and then you decide you want to go a step further and you want to run it on Kubernetes. It's not such a jump. You're not then taking a legacy application and going, right, we're going to run it on Kubernetes and we're going to containerize it. It's more of an incremental step rather than this kind of huge hop. And I think that's good because it's although kind of perpetual change is scary, I think sort of saying we're going to move this all the way into the kind of the latest and greatest is kind of a little bit more scary. So it's kind of the lesser evil. Which one's the lesser evil type thing?
Yeah, and that's a lot less scary than some of the waterfall releases I've been on in my career, that were just scary because there was hundreds of features and changes and things, and when something went wrong, it went horribly wrong.
Yeah,
Versus today, I'll make little changes that are just, not moving boulders. They're just a handful of pebbles. Like, here you
yeah,
go. And if something goes wrong, it just doesn't freak us out as much. So it sounds like, I mean, I'm gonna add a third element to your world, the industry, and you're in Formula One, so things are gonna move fast.
yeah.
But then there's also you, your personality. But then also, I think it's the culture that you've created through cloud, DevOps, APIs, and this kind of this way of flexing your muscles and your knowledge and what you need to know to get the job done. And you guys are just confident in your abilities, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think as well is that quite sort of an important, certainly from sort of our experience within sort of the cloud and DevOps team, is that sort of don't be afraid of kind of what you don't know. So when we sort of ventured into sort of the Kubernetes realm, we didn't really have too much of an idea. It was just kind of let's play around with it. Let's learn about it and see what the hype's about because we'd heard loads about it at the time, and we learned from kind of like people who had experience in it and sort of ended up sort of paving our own route, and now we're kind of running production systems in it, and so yeah, I think it's certainly that kind of, even if kind of it's something that's complete alien, it's still worth taking a look at because it might provide you benefit somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, and it's definitely building up that muscle. It's like training for a marathon or a race. That you've got to be doing this regularly. There's a lot of training that goes behind this, but you
Mm.
have to be willing to learn new things. You have to be curious, have a certain amount of curiosity, but also be able to find information. This is one of my questions that I ask. I think I asked probably 75% of my guests, and I feel like I should replace it, but I keep hearing some really interesting answers. I'm going to keep asking is, where do you get your new information? How do you personally learn new things, or your team? What's the best source to access info?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I always find it's a bit sort of left field, but I find YouTube's a great if you're curious about something and you don't know that much about it. YouTube's fantastic because you can find sort of very high level overviews to really sort of deep diving and very sort of specialist topics about that certain thing. And so I find if I'm kind of curious about something, I will usually go to YouTube and find an overview of some sort, and a technical overview. So there's sort of a bit of tech thrown in there, sort of give me a bit of an understanding, and that's really kind of how that's kind of my first step into it really, and then if I want to really want to sort of deep dive, it does depend on the topic, but Google's your friend, right? Finding there's massive amounts of great content out there for learning, and it doesn't necessarily require sort of training courses or even kind of payment. There's a lot of things that you can get sort of halfway there at the very least on kind of the free content that's available through Google and YouTube and stuff. And then once we kind of get to that point and we go, yeah, actually this is something that we really want to, we want to get our things in and really sort of going quite hard with this, then we might look at, exploring other avenues for sort of the entire team and stuff, and kind of more specialist training. But yeah, generally before that, it's just self-research.
Yeah, no, it's important. And there's a certain amount of curiosity, I think, that's required. You got to want to learn these things. You got to be wanting to scratch. YouTube's a big place. You got to be good at searching, finding what you need. But I think it's a good way. I work real hard to have my team produce a lot of video content. That's not just Postman specific. We focus across the API lifecycle and in areas that aren't directly API to try to educate people. And we have 3 formats. We have our 90-second, our 10-minute, and our 60-minute formats that we publish to try to, because we know we're all busy and we need, sometimes a 2-minute video is all we got time for on our lunch break.
Yeah.
What's innovation look like? I mean, you got Kubernetes in production. What's the innovation landscape look like? Is it AI ML? Is it serverless? Is it service mesh? Like, what's the spectrum of things that interest your team?
Ooh, sort of a bit of everything. So at the moment, Kubernetes is quite hot. We're playing around with all kinds of various applications and technologies on that, and integrating it with our GitOps framework. We're also looking to implement that same framework on premise as well, so that we really do have that kind of source of truth that kind of sprawl into cloud environments, on-prem environments, and through that. So that's exciting us. Serverless, we've always been a massive fan of serverless. So we use a lot of it for our automation on the platform. We just find it works, it's reliable, and it's one of those kind of, once you do it, you fire it and forget about it, and it just kind of does its thing. So yeah, we're big advocates of serverless in that. In terms of kind of innovation, I guess it's certainly bringing the lots more of the DevOps framework onto our sort of broadcast sites, and that's kind of exciting us because there's so much scope for having that. Everything on all kind of layers, application layers, to kind of almost like, and also sort of network infrastructure and that sort of thing. It's all this kind of scope, and we're working with the various teams at the moment to really bring that kind of same framework that works so well for us in the cloud, and bringing that down into kind of the broadcast environments as well. So that's got us kind of quite excited at the moment, I think.
I like to hear that, because what really excites me about APIs is, when I started this 2010, it was, well, we have websites, now we have mobile apps, we need to standardize our APIs. And then we got devices, Internet of Things, but the network lately, I'm doing a lot of work with Cisco and Cloudflare and Akamai and others, like the programmability of our networks. Like, as an old DNS, like, I always hated DNS back in the old days. Like, I love DNS now because there's all this enablement. So like the network layer, there's just so much opportunity for automation and just living applications. I would say the concept of what an application is just blown out of the water now. Like, you're just applying all your digital resources and capabilities is what you're doing.
Yeah, you really are. You kind of almost bring in like you're creating an abstract idea of an application in that sense, aren't you? Because an application isn't the application as we used to know and love. It will act in the same way as you said, as sort of that network infrastructure and that kind of having that layer above it. You then, what kind of sits beneath doesn't really matter. It's just an abstract idea, and you control it in the same way, you deploy in the same way, and it's interesting. It's come it's so far from what it used to be. You had those kind of vertical kind of silos. An app was an app, and a network, a network switch was a network switch, and that was that.
Yeah. What's changed for y'all in the COVID times here? Has it evolved how you approach what you do?
What hasn't changed, I think, is during the COVID period, we so the traveling circus was essentially split in two. So when COVID kind of kicked off, we had a bit of a very, very small bit of breathing space, and there was a lot of conversations, can we go and race? And there was a lot of conversations between us and the local authorities at the place we were going to next. And essentially our sort of senior leadership said, well, at the moment, the less people we can send, the better. The less equipment we can send, the better. So it was always a multi-year strategy for Formula One to do remote production. It was always discussed because we have a goal by 2030 to be net zero carbon in terms of our sustainability goals. So it was always kind of going to form part of it. Now, this was a multi-year thing, or a multi-year plan, and we ended up executing it in 7 weeks. It was a all hands on deck idea. It was something that we'd never done before, and we had the whole engineering division and in all their different silos in the production teams, and we split it in half and stretched it across a WAN link. So we ended up having what was called the broadcast center, which was this singular unit, singular data center that traveled, ended up getting to split into 2 entities, and that was known as the RTC, which is the Remote Technical Center, which is what we run back in the UK, and the ETC, which is the Event Technical Center, which hosts a subset of our real kind of latency and critical systems that are trackside in case we have connectivity issues. We can still provide those services. We can still have a race, and so it was basically took kind of the culture side of things, tipped that upside down, and also the technology as well, tipped that upside down, because what we were, systems that were traditionally trackside were now based in the UK, and there was a lot of adoption that had to take place. I mean, everything from our timing services, which is, sort of quite latency critical, to the team of people that do the color correction, live color correction on the cameras that are trackside. That gets done from here as well. So, you go somewhere like Japan or Australia, and you're color correcting a camera, and you're having, say, 130 milliseconds on your action before it's actioned or before you see the result. So, and they were very used to it being, sub-milliseconds, because it was actually at the event, it was all fibered. So everything changed. It really did. And what was nice is that, we got a race out, that first kind of race. It was a bit nerve-wracking for everyone involved. We tested it, but, we got through it. And then it was kind of, right, well, what's the next iteration of it? What services can we do? Do we need the services at the RTC? Can we use the cloud for remote production? And it stimulated so many ideas. So in terms of 2020, it was a real kind of year of innovation. We kind of had, years and years worth of innovation in kind of condensed into 6 months. And it was a busy time, but it was good. And we managed to reduce the amount of traveling kit that went to the race. We reduced by 34%. So that's a lot of kit that we've saved, and is now sort of back in Kent in the UK, and that's where we do a lot of our remote broadcast from. So it was an interesting time.
Wow. Yeah, what a journey. I mean, I think just your overall journey as a company, but during this time, I mean, it sounds like, and I hate saying coming out of COVID, because it's just been such a hard time on a human level for so many folks, but you're going to come out of it better on the other side, aside from the human, but from the human side and human costs is organizationally you're much more agile, nimble, flexible, able to respond to whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, this is exactly it. It was a kind of a, it was a real sort of testament of just, this has worked for 15 years, but, everyone's heads together, and, we've managed to achieve this, and, and it's being sort of put into a proper facility, and the technologies that were sort of used are just kind of iterating, and, and we're sort of taking it that step further, and we're now sort of doing dabbling in cloud-based production, because that kind of seems to be the next step of the journey. I know sort of there's sort of a few organizations that are pushing cloud-based production, and it looks fantastic. So that's kind of the next, I suppose, cycle of our kind of production, is to kind of see what we can do in that space, and that's all very exciting.
Well, I look forward to your journey, hearing more about it in the future, because I think y'all definitely built up some muscles and some processes and approach that's pretty compelling to learn about. I appreciate you coming by today and sharing this with me.
No, not at all. Thank you for inviting me.
Wow, thank you, and enjoy future races. I wish you all the best and luck in your API and cloud and DevOps journey. I think the ops transformation is going to be continue to be very interesting landscape, and I look forward to tuning in. Thanks for sharing.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Ken.
All right, enjoy your day. Thanks again to Ryan for stopping by. For more on Ryan, you can find them on LinkedIn, and you can learn more about Formula One at formula1.com. You can subscribe to the Breaking Changes podcast at postman.com/events/breaking-changes. I'm your host, Ken Lane, and until next time, cheers.